Welcome to this class on environmental economics. I'm Jake Bile. I'll be your instructor. I will first talk a little bit about myself and introduce how I got here, and then give a quick overview of where we'll be going in the course. So I am in my first year at Western Kentucky, just finished up a first great year, and I'm happy to be here, happy to be with you for this. Before that, I was at Vanderbilt as a postdoctoral scholar where I taught this class, but at the PhD level. Before that, I clerked for judges, for federal judges for a couple years, both at the trial and appellate levels. And fortunately got to work on quite a few environmental cases on that. So there's some material that I'll draw in based on those experiences. I got into clerking because I went to graduate school to study law and economics. So I got a law degree and an economics PhD at the same time, which meant I was in school for a long time, but I enjoyed it. And I was focusing on the law and economics of environmental issues. I especially focused on biodiversity and endangered species regulations. So we'll talk a little bit about endangered species and other wildlife issues in this class. Much of this class will be talking about pollution control, how pollution damages people, the cost of reducing it, the benefits of reducing it. So we'll be hearing a lot about pollution and emissions, effluent, things like that. I won't get into legal stuff. It gets tempting sometimes, but there are other classes for that if you're interested. But we will talk quite a bit about economics. It is an economics class, and we're interested in environmental issues, but we're using the tools of economics to be able to think analytically about those environmental issues. So in the beginning of the class, we'll start with some kind of big topic, almost overview sort of things, looking at things from a 30,000 foot view. And a reason we do that is to kind of frame these issues. We don't want to get lost in the weeds right away. We need to keep some perspective on kind of where we're going, why we should care about these sort of things. And a reason we want to build up that momentum is because the second section, which will be covered in the second week of class, is going to be getting more into the analytical tools that we're using. So that gets more into the economics. How do we think about supply and demand of these things? How do we measure the benefits and the cost of these things? So we'll talk about kind of general analytical tools in week 2. In week 3, we'll get into specific ones, and we'll be looking at cost and benefits of different policy proposals. So there, we're going to be talking about analytical tools, but at that point we start drawing in real-world examples. So hopefully we've kept your interest through that point, and we get to see how these tools are helpful when we're trying to make decisions about how to use resources, about how to structure our society, the big questions that a lot of us care a lot about. So after that, we will talk more about policy evaluation in general, not just with cost-benefit analysis, but a more general sense of how do we think about these different policies and then compare them, again, using the tools of economics. And we're going to end the semester in week 5 with a real local to global step up, looking at some kind of similar issues, but ones that we see at a local level, state level, federal level, and then global level. So things like air pollution, that it may be a matter between you and your neighbor, if we're talking about them burning trash in their yard. Maybe it gets up to a state level if we're talking about a bunch of cars or trucks on a road, and the emissions from those cars are causing smog, right? Now that smog could cross state lines, and then we have a regional or even a national issue, so we'll talk about some of those. And then we'll talk about global issues, because the smog doesn't care about borders, right? So it can be a global issue depending on what kind of pollutant it is. And one of the big ones we'll talk about is global warming. And so carbon dioxide, methane, other greenhouse gases that are emitted, that go up into the atmosphere. It doesn't really matter where they're emitted. As long as they make it up into the atmosphere, they have this same sort of greenhouse effect. And so that's really a global issue. And so it's really a global scale if we're going to think about that problem and trying to address it. So we'll talk about going from that backyard burning trash all the way up to the Paris Climate Accord. And we'll do that explicitly in the last week of class. But along the way, we'll be pulling in examples from all of those different levels. And certainly let me know with comments or questions if there are things that kind of come to mind as we're talking about stuff and you say, yeah, we had a neighbor who had an issue with this kind of water pollution. Bring that up. We'll have discussion boards. We'll have opportunities to get involved, and I would love to have you guys be active parts in this. So I'm excited to have you. I look forward to a great course.